So I wanted to talk about the filings that the defense recently filed in regards to the Richard Allen case. People have been going over the Odinism point and like ritualistic killings and all that. But I would like to come at it from like sort of a different point of view, but the most important point of view is mine, of course. No, in my opinion, this would be the most important way to look at it, because ultimately what this whole 136 page motion is doing is trying to argue their point that this search warrant should be thrown out. And so while some people may think that they put everything in there to taint a jury, I'm going to argue that that's not actually their point. And so let's get into it. Challenging the validity of a search warrant. It's very important to understand how search warrants can be challenged in legal proceedings.
During a search that was unconstitutional. According to a new motion filed in Carroll County Court, they claim the Sheriff's Department omitted facts and made false and misleading statements to get the search warrant of Richard Allen's home. The request for the search warrant failed to establish probable cause that would explain why evidence would be found in Allen's house, and the officers who searched Allen's home exceeded the scope of the search warrant. The motion also claims the search warrant listed only generic items that could be found in any home in Indiana, rather than specific items related to the murders of the two teenagers. The defense claims for all those reasons, the search violated Allen's constitutional rights, and they're requesting any evidence collected during the search be withheld from a jury.
We have some key players here. So we have the defense, the prosecution, and the court. These parties play distinct roles in the legal process, with the defense advocating for the accused, the prosecution representing the state, and the court ensuring justice is served. So let's go into a little bit of... We also need to understand search warrant basics. So a search warrant is a legal document that allows law enforcement to search a specific location for evidence of a crime. In the Constitution, our main point of interest for a search warrant would be the Fourth Amendment, and that protects against unreasonable searches and seizures, ensuring that searches are conducted with proper authorization.
The rights of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Okay, fine, but what does all that mean? It means that you can't just search someone's private property for evidence of a crime without their permission. If you need to search someone's private property, it's usually best to get a search warrant.
This is an honorary mention because I had to pause for the stash and then look at his firm, Law Stash Law Firm. That's funny.
Folks, we're talking about how search warrants work. The first thing you need to know is the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution requires search warrants to be issued only on probable cause. Police have to prove probable cause through an affidavit. That's a sworn statement. That can also be supplemented by testimony in front of the issuing judge, usually a magistrate. At a minimum, the affidavit needs to provide, number one, a description of the place to be searched, and that's got to be fairly specific. Number two, the items police expect to find there, and it can't just say evidence of a crime. They've got to be kind of specific about those items as well. Third, it's got to state why the police think they'll find the evidence they're looking for there. And it's got to tie that area to criminal activity in the recent past. If it doesn't, it can be invalidated. Based on that, the magistrate decides probable cause, which, for a search warrant, is whether there's a fair probability evidence of the crime will be found in the place to be searched based on the affidavit. So, if you've been searched...
One thing that really concerns me about this whole process is the lack of focus on the actual Constitution. And so, like, as much as I may want Libby and Abby's killer to be caught, those underlying constitutional rights are just crucial for every citizen, and it's what our whole country is based on. It's what people have fought in wars for, and it's what keeps us from being like a communist country where people can just like be arrested for reporting against the law enforcement, and like it protects just normal citizens from just being trampled on by the law enforcement or prosecutors. And so in a small town like Delphi, I think this is like even more important because there's not really like the oversight within their local government. If you look, every single government role is filled with a Republican, which is fine. I'm an independent, so I agree with some stuff on that side and some stuff on the other side. But that there's not even anyone challenging these people is a little bit of like a red flag, or like the citizens should be kind of concerned with this. And I'm not like against law enforcement, but I just see how the corruption or just like lack of oversight could cause some like decay within the departments. And I'll give you like an example of Nick McClellan. He is like the head person in his department, and there's not really anyone who tells him like what to do or checks what he spends money on. The city council has been like working on that, and I think that's a huge testament to Deb Lowe, who has a YouTube channel, and she goes to all the meetings and records them. And that's a like crucial part. Like transparency in your government officials is so important. It cannot be understated, the importance of like the media's right to report on stuff and citizens' rights to question their government officials. Like it isn't a bad thing, and these government officials should be able to stand up to that scrutiny. Like,
someone is arrested and charged with a crime, prosecutors must publicly file a probable cause affidavit to explain the why. It's required by law, but today that did not happen.
Today's about Abby and Libby.
At today's press conference, the Carroll County prosecutor said he asked a judge to keep those documents under seal because the investigation is ongoing and investigators want more tips from the public.
For that reason and for the nature of this case, the probable cause and the charging information has been sealed by the court.
But that is troubling to some legal experts.
It is surprising.
Novella Needeth spent 2 decades as a public defender, and she now teaches law at Indiana University.
I can't think of ever hearing of a probable cause affidavit being held 30 days after an arrest was made.
The law professor says releasing probable cause information helps ensure due process for the defendant and allows the public to ask important questions. In this case, both of those could be in jeopardy because the whole case is essentially being kept secret. A hearing will be held to determine if the case details should remain under seal, but Indiana State Police say that could take a while. The head of Indiana State Police says he doesn't expect anything to happen between now and the 2nd or 3rd week of November. Then he says the judge will have to decide what and when to unseal. So for now, the evidence leading to Richard Allen's arrest remains a mystery until we get to see those court documents.
In this case, folks, for this thing to get going, and
know what's going on within our governments. And I just really encourage everyone to be like aware of what's going on in their own local governments, and also like your school boards and stuff like that. Like these are things you should be aware of what's going on. Anyways, so sorry, I got a little bit off track there, a little preachy on that. But like, I'll just use like one example. So Liggett was coming up for a sheriff's election, right? And the person that was running against him as an independent, I believe, was shoot, I forgot his name, Prickett or something, but I feel like that sounds too much like Liggett. But they had a debate, and they were talking about how like Tony Liggett is a good old boy, and he said that like the people want to work for him and all this stuff. And then somebody from the crowd was like, shouldn't they want to work for the people, like the citizens? And he's like, oh, well, yeah. And so the other guy was saying how if he got in there, he would open up the investigation. And so I don't necessarily think that like everybody in the government is like actually involved in like covering up the murders. Or like the way I see it is we usually have yearly inspections, but since there was COVID for like the basically 2 or 3 years went by without us having an inspection. And so when it's done year to year, like it's a lot easier because you've already had to like make sure everything is in tip-top shape like once that year. But after like 3 years have gone by, it's like a lot of stuff kind of slipped through the cracks, and there wasn't like that oversight, or like there was like a lack of accountability, I would say. And so then when our inspections came up this year, I was like, oh crap, like I feel like I'm not all ready for this. And so that's kind of how I view how Liggett and stuff is under a lot of pressure to get that re-election as the sheriff, because they've kept everybody out and like had their own little group that is investigating this case. And also there was like a lot of money thrown, like they could go to their city council and request money and get it, because if they just brought up this case, like everybody wants it solved. And so people were like, yeah, whatever it takes, like let's do this.
Building. On Monday, commissioners approved the leasing of space on North 9th Street. The 2-year lease will cost the county $7,200 annually. Carroll County Sheriff Tobe Lesenby says the space is comparable to what they have now. Investigators with the Sheriff's Office and State Police will use the building for interviews. They'll also follow up on leads and hold meetings with outside agencies. Lesenby says it's important to have an isolated location. He says it will allow them to better focus on the investigation into the homicides of Abby Williams and Libby German.
This is not what the sheriff or the commissioners or the county council want. This is for the girls. This is for Abby and Libby, and so it's our effort to continue to move forward with trying to find justice for them.
Investigators will be in the new building by the end of the month.
I don't know about any of you, but I've never heard of a department getting a whole different building for one case. That's totally weird to me. But maybe it's just like people's ego in the way. They're from a small town. It's not like they've ever dealt with anything like this before. And so instead of like asking for help, they just like kept it going. I'm going to put in a little clip from Choo Choo, I forget what it is, Choo Choo Crime Tube or something, but they're hilarious. And I'm going to put in a couple of examples to illustrate what I mean. They didn't necessarily have the incentive like to, because if you think about it, like Nick McClellan, for him to bring somebody to charge somebody with these murders, he now has to put in all that extra work and go through like all the scrutiny, and like you know, it's a big case, everybody's looking at him, he has to like put in the work, he's got to put in the time. Whereas like when nobody was arrested, there like people were just kind of like, he could do whatever he wants. I mean, heaven forbid he work over his 32-hour work week, like with weeks off for vacation, like every couple months, maybe even every month. And like, so I think that my mistrust in the government has more to do with that, and like them not wanting those eyes on the case to see like maybe where they made mistakes.
Double homicide investigation change.
Change in what manner? That is a top priority case. Things are very positive. I'll leave it at that. Things are very positive right now. Nothing would change. We bring people in. We have help. Things are going well.
I have also worked on the case. From the very beginning, I wanted to be involved the day had a team that was ready to go. Was told to contact another agency to get the go-ahead. We finally did. I didn't get there until day 4. I pledged to do everything that I can to make that better.
The general core of this investigation group would stay.
There is a team that is ready at any given point to assist. His knowledge of the case is important, but he'll have some help.
So there's a team someplace?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm a detective first. I have a high-profile case that we're working hard on every day. I can make all kinds of suggestions and do those things. It's still out of my hands. I've done that. Y'all just talked about all the guys that are backing me. I've created that culture for me. We have that culture. They want to work hard. They want to do that for me.
But shouldn't they want to do that for the citizens of the county? Use them for you. So
that's why I just wanted to make sure that people understand.
Several months ago, got contacted by a retired West Lafayette police detective. Said he had someone that needed to be checked out that had been brought to his attention regarding the Delphi murder. Wanted to know if I had anybody to get a hold of. I said, sure. 2 weeks later, this West Lafayette detective contacted me back and he said, nobody's ever contacted me.
You guys all clap on the good old boy thing. I feel like I broke the good old boy nonsense. I'm not from here, and now I'm standing up here, won the primary for the Republican Party to be the sheriff of Carroll County. I broke that mold. There's no good old boy. I'm not the good old boy.
Mark, you have said over and over that there's help there waiting to help us. Are you still willing to help our county? And are you willing to accept?
We're all good old boys. All of us are good old boys. And
Flashback.
there's no good old boy. I'm not the good old boy.
12 seconds later.
We're all good old boys. All of us are good old boys who will help in whatever way we need.
I'm not a good old boy.
You said that help has been refused. Why?
I don't know what help is talking about. There have been agencies that have offered help. TBI for one of them, Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. They have wanted to help. And they have.
So I have a pretty high-profile case that I'm working on. I'm the only detective now. I'm the only detective now. I'm the only detective now. I do the best that I...
Especially like Tobe Lesenby, I remember at the beginning of this case, was like, you know, there's no book on how to handle this situation. And I'm thinking, there's tons of books on it. Like there's literally, like, you can get a degree in college. Like there's books on it. There's friggin' experts, and like I think that they didn't bring in experts and stuff when they should have.
Claims his constitutional rights have been violated throughout his employment because of his political affiliations. He's filed a lawsuit against the Carroll County Sheriff's Department and Sheriff Tobe Lesenby. Michael Thomas ran in the Republican primary for Carroll County Sheriff this year. He claims the current administration disapproved of his run for office because of his stance regarding the Delphi child homicides. Thomas says his recommendations for experts to be brought in to help with the Delphi double homicide investigation were ignored. He's no longer involved with that case. Detective Tony Liggett won the nomination in the primary. Thomas claims 3 days later he was demoted from his position as chief deputy, and Liggett was promoted to replace him.
What we're saying here is that, you know, Michael didn't have the same opportunities that other officers had once it was determined that he was not going to support this candidate that the sheriff wanted to see supported and in fact was going to run against him. Things changed for him. He wasn't treated equally with other people in similar positions within his office.
And I do think that it's a possibility that they missed stuff or didn't dive in deeply to stuff just because maybe they weren't educated on you know, cults and stuff. And so talking about when I say like their egos or whatever.
It's unlike anything this county has ever seen. I've been at it for 30 years. I've never seen this in my career. But it's positive. There's a lot of energy going in and out of that building. Unlike any other case, possibly in the state of Indiana, and not to take away from anybody else's case, but this one is, as you said, a high priority.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. Be better.
Right. Okay, I'll be better.
That's your job. Thank you.
There's multiple points where we can see that they messed up. And I'm not like trying to be anti-law enforcement, but like in this situation, there was a lot of mistakes and people who maybe like, I don't know, Tobe Lesenby, who kept control of this case and like wouldn't let other people on it. And like they even got a private building for this investigation, which like
Delphi City.
So anyways, let's get back into what we were talking about. But it is all connected, so you're not wasting your time listening to me ramble, in my opinion, but maybe you are. We'll see. Okay. Anyways. Okay, so the defense alleges that the warrant was obtained based on false statements, omissions of important information, and a lack of probable cause. So the defense presents an alternate theory suggesting that other suspects may be involved and provides evidence from the prosecutor's own discovery to support their argument. If the defense claims that the detective lied or omitted crucial information in that application, it can be a serious matter. Here's how the situation might play out. The detective, when confronted with the allegations of false statements or omissions, could respond by claiming that they made an honest mistake or errors in the application process. They might argue that they were not aware of the discrepancies or that the discrepancies were not material to the issuance of the warrant. That's why when they're talking about the discrepancies in the statements of the witnesses, they stress that these statements were made to Tony Liggett. So they're eliminating that his ability to say, oh, I wasn't aware, because he was aware. They made those statements directly to him. The detective might also assert that they are acting in good faith when preparing the warrant application and that they did not deliberately provide false information or omit relative facts. And so the defense will likely need to present compelling evidence to support their claim that the evidence might include witness statements, interviews, or other documentation that contradicts the information presented in the warrant application. Any inconsistencies between what the detective presented in the application and what witnesses or evidence actually reveal will be crucial to building the defense's case. So that's why they go through like line by line, and they cite every statement that they are claiming in this 136-page document. They have the link to the resource where they got that, and these resources that they're looking at are directly from the prosecutor's own discovery information that they sent over to the defense. So this is like a really important aspect of the whole paper, and why I think it's kind of disingenuous, or like maybe people just don't understand like what they're actually trying to do in that whole 136-page motion, is to support their Frank's motion or whatever that is trying to object to the search warrant. So like everything in that paper is in some way trying to get that search warrant thrown out and show how they didn't obtain it legally. Okay, so the court will conduct a thorough review of the allegations. We already kind of talked about the Fourth Amendment, and this is a constitutional amendment that's at the heart of search and seizure issues, ensuring that searches are conducted fairly and with proper justification. Also, the 11th Amendment is brought up, which is equal protection. This amendment ensures all individuals are treated fairly and equally under the law. And then there's the 14th Amendment, and that's due process and equal protection. This amendment protects individual rights and prohibits discrimination in the legal process. And so the defense attorneys in Richard Allen's case are invoking the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause as part of their argument to challenge the validity of the search warrant. To understand how they believe the search may have violated Allen's right to equal protection under the law, it's important to consider the context and legal principles involved. The 11th and 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution are both important components of the Bill of Rights that addresses different aspects of civil liberties and legal protections for individuals. And I'm just like a huge fan, I guess, of the Bill of Rights, and usually going to be my main point of contention with Richard Allen being in prison like he is. And it's not that I necessarily think he is innocent, although I don't see the signs that point to his guilt as clearly as other people do, which I think other people are basing it on what they believe the prosecution must have, and I'm basing it on what I've seen that the prosecution actually does have. And so that's probably just talking out of my ass, trying to be like, oh, well, I see it this way, and that's better. But, like, I'm not the smartest person, so, like, y'all make up your own minds. But I would just, would like you guys to know what the basis for these arguments are, and why I think that people are incorrect when they're looking at the defense as, like, they're trying to taint a jury. I don't really think that that is their intention, and so I'm going to go into that in more detail. The 11th Amendment, search warrant basics. What is a search warrant? It's a legal document that allows law enforcement to search a specific location for evidence of a crime. In the 4th Amendment to the Constitution, we have this protects against unreasonable searches and seizures, ensuring that searches are conducted with proper authorization. Defense alleges that the warrant was obtained based on false statements, omissions of important information, and a lack of probable cause. The defense also presents an alternate theory suggesting that other suspects may be involved and provides evidence from the prosecutor's discovery to support their argument. Challenges to the validity of search warrants are not uncommon in legal proceedings. If the court determines that the detective's actions were egregious, deliberate, and materially affected the issuance of the warrant, it may result in the suppression of evidence obtained during the search. However, if the court finds that any inaccuracies or omissions were minor and did not determine the overall validity of the warrant, it might allow the evidence to be used in the trial. Ultimately, the outcome will depend on specific facts, evidence, and legal arguments presented in court. Let's talk about the legal principles involved. The defense attorneys in Richard Allen's case are arguing the search of Allen's home violated his Fourth Amendment rights, which protect against unreasonable searches and seizures. They may also be invoking Article 1, Section 11 of the Indiana Constitution, which likely contains similar protections. Additionally, they cite the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause, suggesting that the search may have violated Allen's rights to equal protection under the law. These constitutional arguments are crucial in challenging the validity of the search warrant and the admissibility of the evidence in Allen's case. To understand how they believe the search may have violated Allen's rights to equal protection under the law, it's important to consider the context and legal principles involved. The 14th Amendment states that no state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protections of the laws. This clause has been interpreted by the courts to mean that individuals who are similarly situated should be treated equally by the government. And here's how the defense is framing their argument. The defense is suggesting that the search warrant was obtained and executed in a manner that singled out Richard Allen unfairly or disproportionately compared to others in similar situations. They're trying to say that the law enforcement targeted Allen in a selective enforcement, and this violated his right to equal protection. One of the things that was filed by the defense in support of the Franks motion was the deposition of Trooper X. And so I think it maybe comes from the report from Detective Click, but I'm not 100% sure on this. But it goes, are you confident that there are also people running around in this society that subscribe to the system of beliefs that are frankly evil or bad people? Blank and his followers? And the answer is, without making a moral-based judgment, there are some that believe in this system of, again, philosophy or whatever you want to call it, that have tendencies that are outside the norm. Again, most of those revolve around the white supremacy movement. Definitely some very strong feelings by them. People that subscribe to violence. People that I would say would be quick to violence. Okay, other than this circumstance with blank, I don't want to make him the center of attention today, but other than that, have you done any other investigations, maybe even after that, regarding this Odinism cult or group? We've seen some of the runes and things like that show up in some of the prisons, and I've been asked a couple of times about what that might mean by various tattoos or something on a letter, but as far as an investigation, no. So, when they go into all of this detail, like about how guilty statement or people like actually admitting to the crime, talking. So the defense says Unified Command's failure to vigorously pursue the obvious links between the crime scene and Odinism is even more perplexing when evidence known to law enforcement demonstrated a clear nexus between Brad Holder and at least 4 other suspects: Elvis, Patrick, Johnny, and Rod. So we're going to go over each one of these individuals, and I'm just going to point out a couple of the most salient things that they talk about, and the things that you'll be like, what the crap? But there's definitely more in the document, and you're going to want to look at that and read it yourself and come to your own conclusions. Okay, first is Brad Holder, and this is Abby's little boyfriend's dad, and she had never met him, so she would not have recognized him. And he is a Mason and a Finlander, and he also has supposed ruins, and he painted that painting like 1 year after the girls went missing. And his ex-wife Westfall and Holder were close friends as late as January 21st. However, that friendship ended abruptly, according to his ex-wife, that they had a disagreement that occurred when they were holding a ritual near a river, and one of them did something that the other one didn't agree with, and they no longer talked to each other. Brad told his ex-wife that Westfall and his people killed Abby and Libby because of their mothers were mixing with other people outside the race. And he also told her he'd only protect her so much if she keeps asking questions. Westfall lives very close to the Monon High Bridge in Delphi. Westfall apparently told investigators that he was home on February 13, 2017, and the defense is unaware of any search warrant to search his house, or whether they even knocked on the neighbors' doors to verify his alibi. Next is Johnny Messer, and he's from Rushville and also was friends with Holder and Westfall. He apparently was a recruiter for the Odinites, and is the link between the Rushville people, who are Fields and Abrams, and the Delphi Patrick Westfall and Brad Holder. In Jerry Holman's deposition, he claimed to not even know who Messer was, nor what evidence showed his possible connection, and he was cleared as a suspect in the murders. Messer's ex-girlfriend told the police that Messer and Westfall were like brothers. She also told police that she had allowed Johnny to borrow her car on or around Valentine's Day 2017, and that he drove her car up there to hang out with his Vinlander friends. When he returned the vehicle, it had dried blood over one side of it. Messer refused to discuss the details of how the blood got there. Messer's ex-girlfriend further stated it took her several car washes to finally remove the blood. Messer has claimed that he never, not once in his life, has been to Delphi, home of his quote-unquote brother, Patrick Westfall, and near the home of his other Odinite brother, Holder. Messer's ex-girlfriend further told law enforcement that Holder and Messer were 2 of the most violent people she knew and were fully capable of having been involved in the murders. She said that the motivation in the murder could be the concept of blood in and blood out, which means social acceptance into their secret circles. Additionally, Messer's ex-girlfriend had been listening to and recording his phone calls. Police secured the phone and listened to 3 phone calls involving him. 2 of those phone calls, Messer was offering money to other people to find someone so they can be injured or killed. And the third involves Messer bragging about holding a subject hostage and shooting them at his house. Despite all of this, there was no search warrants issued for his house, and they did not attempt to use interrogation to preserve the truth about the involvement of Messer, Holder, or Westfall in these crimes. And last but certainly not least is Elvis Fields, who, after being questioned, who actually comes back to the detective and says, if I could explain why my spit is on one of the victims, like, would that get me out of trouble? That's a huge problem there, guys. I don't care if you believe in the ritualistic aspects of it. Like, that statement right there it's a big one. It's a very big one. All of those things that could link those people to that crime scene did not cause law enforcement to search their houses, issue a search warrant for any of their houses. Not the guy who said his spit might be on the victims. The one guy tells his sister that he was involved in it. The other guy, his wife, is telling law enforcement that he said, not the guy who said his spit might be on the victims. The one guy tells his sister that he was involved in it. The other guy, his wife, is telling law enforcement that he said his friend was like they got in a fight and like they're not getting along. None of those people had law enforcement go and ask for search warrants in those cases. Even when that guy supposedly gave his jacket or was trying to give his jacket to his sister, no search warrant. When he said his spit would be found on the victims, nope, not very much interest in that. And so those would be, in my opinion, similarly situated individuals, right? Like, and so that's where I think they're coming in with that equal protection. So although they spin this very nice story, this story is not actually intended for the public. Like, you think about it, the defense, they have to file that that document unredacted, right? Because they're actually, when they turn that in, they're turning it into like the judge, right? They are making a legal argument for their client to the judge with footnotes of everything that they cite. They're not going to the judge with all these citations and stuff that doesn't have that stuff there for her to watch or look at when she's reviewing this. Can you imagine doing that and wasting Judge Gold's time with that? Their job is to protect their client's rights, and the way that they're doing that requires them to illustrate that their client is being treated in a different way than other people in similarly situated of like, oh, well, he's linked to the crime because he said he was taking a walk, but like this person also is linked because his son is dating one of the victims, and this person lived 7 houses away, and this person lied about their alibi. And you know, this again is not intended for the general public, because the court clerk should redact that stuff whether they put it under seal or not. She should have read through and made sure that there was no witnesses' names just putting them out there. Like, can you imagine how dangerous that is to have all that out there? It's crazy, right? And so the defense is not trying to get the judge all pissed off at him. Like, that's not a way to win their motion, by like lying and wasting her time, like looking at all these citations that don't actually back up what they're saying. So to me, like, yeah, they have all that stuff. They filed it, and that stuff is under seal, so we can't see it, but it's there. Like, it's definitely there. And I'm guessing that when they say, like, this will be found at this point in time in the interview, that's actually what it says, right? Because they're not going to be winning their case by lying to the judge and getting her pissed off. Do you know what I mean? So I just think it's kind of like it's a silly argument. And also their little snarkiness, because there's definitely points in it where they're a little bit like sarcastic, or like, that is meant for the prosecutor, because it's taken them a long time to put over the discovery. And basically the defense is saying, like, you have all this information on all these different, like, hard drives, and, like, your case is in shambles. It was sloppy, that they missed stuff, and they did, and we all know that they did. Another argument they could be making is that the search warrant application and approval process was arbitrary or capricious. If it can be shown that law enforcement acted without proper justification or that the warrant was granted without sufficient evidence of wrongdoing, the defense might argue that Allen was treated unfairly in comparison to others facing similar circumstances. And for this, I think an example of this might be that, according to the prosecutor, like, requesting the access to get Richard Allen's work records, like, about whether he was working that day, that would show, like, that maybe they prematurely got this search warrant without even having checked, like, was he working that day? Or, like, they maybe, like, didn't investigate as thoroughly before, like, taking that big step of, like, violating your rights to go in. Like, they go into his house and search through all his stuff. That's, like, a huge violation of your rights, and definitely something you should protect. Important protection that we have against law enforcement. Another argument is lack of reasonable basis. The defense could claim that there was no reasonable basis for singling out Allen's home for a search. If the search warrant was based on vague or generic information that could apply to virtually any home in the area, they might argue that it lacked a rational basis, and therefore the search violated his right to equal protection under the law. And so, in this circumstance, I would say that anybody in Indiana probably has some black hoodies and some blue hoodies, some jeans, knives. Yep, everybody in Indiana has those. A gun. Tons of people in Indiana have those. Like, these are all things that literally anybody, like, any home in Indiana, they could be like, oh, we're looking for this, and they'll find it. They'll find it anywhere they look. Simple. To summarize the main points, the defense is challenging the search warrant's validity, presenting an alternate theory, citing relevant legal principles, and emphasizing the court's critical role in ensuring a fair legal process. Let me know what you guys think. In my personal opinion, I think the defense was doing its job and filing motions just like they would any other day, and that they didn't write this long story for any of us. They wrote it for Fran Goal. Ultimately, it's not an argument of whether there's Odinism in the area or whether those people are members of that. They are. It's definitely in Indiana. The Ku Klux Klan is openly operating in Indiana, and these people are all linked together. Like, these are not anything that the defense just made up. All this information comes from the prosecution's own files. And whatever you guys think of it, the defense is just using the information to make these legal arguments to support their Frank's motion to suppress the search warrant evidence. So, thank you guys for listening to this. I know it was long. I'm out of breath. I don't even know if I stayed on topic, but please like and subscribe. See ya. Bye.